Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. Only then did she realize the seriousness of the situation and carefully answered me, "Yes, I did drug you. But so what? You didn't drink it anyway." I stood up and instructed the servants beside me, "Drag her away and sell her to a brothel. Choose a prettier girl to compensate that official." Jiang clearly had not expected me to act so decisively, only now did panic appear on her face. "Wait. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything." But I had no interest in hearing it anymore. Her mouth was quickly gagged, and she was dragged away before she could even cry for help. I sent people to investigate. The result pointed to Prince Ethan's Sue, and there was another unexpected discovery. From the very beginning, Jiang had looked down on that minor official and never truly wished to marry him. She had secretly maintained contact with Prince Ethan's Sue. It seemed Prince Ethan's Sue had promised her something, perhaps that if the plan succeeded, he would allow her to become a concubine in his residence. That was why she had dared to take such a risk. It was utterly disgusting. I deliberately had someone leak the information to Prince Ethan's Sue that Jiang had somehow been sold into a brothel. Sure enough, Prince Ethan's Sue went to see her, but in the end, he did not redeem her. He only went there to warn her not to reveal their relationship to anyone. As soon as he stepped out of the brothel, he was caught by Princess Consort Jiang. Princess Consort Jiang's plump figure easily subdued the scumbag standing before her. I stood right in the middle of the street and gave Prince Ethan's Sue a thorough scolding. Afterward, he was escorted back to his residence under the curious gazes of passers-by. I sat down at a tea house nearby, sipping tea while observing the situation. When I lifted my head, I suddenly saw Adrian Sue standing at the window across the street. He looked at me and smiled gently. In truth, it wasn't I who brought Princess Consort Serena Sue here. I merely sent someone to follow them to verify my suspicions. A man as cunning and calculating as Adrian Sue, if he were to casually shoot an arrow, it would never strike just 2 eagles. It would have to bring down 3. Or even 4. The very next day, Prince Ethan's Sue was impeached by a group of court officials. The reason? Improper conduct that disgraced the imperial family. The emperor was utterly humiliated. In his fury, he ordered that Ethan's Sue be stripped of his official position and sent back to his residence to reflect on his behavior. Adrian Sue held a jade pendant in his hand and spoke to me with an apologetic tone. "Prince Ethan's Sue is still useful. I'm sorry, but for now I cannot strike too heavily." The bandits that imperial physician Daniel Jiang had encountered before had indeed been assassins in disguise. They were the same group who had attempted to assassinate Adrian Sue. I suspected that Prince Ethan's Sue was merely a pawn the people behind the scenes intended to send out to contend with me. That was why I wanted to release him, to lure the true mastermind into revealing themselves. "Serena," he said softly, "I remember the jade pendant you had was broken. I've recently learned a bit of jade carving. Take a look. This is the dragon and phoenix jade I just made." In the center of his palm lay a white jade pendant carved in the shape of a dragon. Naturally, it could not compare with the work of professional artisans. But for someone who had only just begun learning, it was already remarkably rare. That jade craftsman refused to make a second pendant, he continued. So I followed him to learn how to carve jade myself. Perhaps it's not as beautiful as the one you had before, but the material is extremely precious. It took me a great deal of effort to find it. Adrian Sue wanted to place the jade pendant into my hand, but I stepped back. My gaze was complicated, my emotions tangled, and in the end I only said one sentence: "You didn't have to do this." I sighed softly. you can never compete with someone who is already gone. His expression shifted slightly. I know, he said, I know. You secretly sent people to search for Adrian Su's body. I said nothing, only looked at him in silence. Adrian Su smiled bitterly. I also know that I'm not worthy of competing with him. I only hope that you won't hate me even more. At the time, the burial was rushed, and it has been so many years. The grass must have grown wild by now. I no longer remember the exact place. When everything is over, I'll help you search for it. Even if I must turn over every inch of earth, I'll find him. I wanted to tell him he didn't need to belittle himself like that, but when I looked into those peach blossom eyes of his, the words that had reached my lips refused to come out. Perhaps this is for the best, I thought. Better not give him any more hope. I did not accept the jade pendant, yet Adrian Su remained stubborn. That's right, he said. It was originally a pair, a dragon and a phoenix. There's still the phoenix pendant. The one I dropped into the river. When I find it, I'll give it to you as well. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he was an incredibly stubborn man, from the beginning of summer until the first hints of winter. He spent a little time every day personally going to the riverside to search. Day after day, he waded into the water, groping among stones and pebbles. He searched a little each day, from the upstream all the way down to the downstream. Adrian Su always had a way of making me lose my composure. No matter how much I scolded him, he refused to give up. Another winter arrived. The 10 miles of plum blossoms outside the city walls had begun to bloom once more. This year's flower viewing banquet was hosted by Queen Isabella Su. Following tradition, many young noble ladies of the capital were invited. Wrapped in a thick cloak, I stepped across the snowy ground toward the place where the banquet was being held. As I passed through a secluded path, someone suddenly blocked my way. When I looked up, I saw Prince Ethan Su. Recently, he had grown noticeably fatter. Miss Jiang, he said with a grin, you are truly a peerless beauty. The older you grow, the more breathtaking you become. Behind me came the muffled sound of someone being gagged. I turned my head and saw Bao Zhu being restrained by a guard. My gaze turned icy as I looked back at Ethan Su. The more I looked at him, the more he resembled a pig. Miss Jiang, he said, the winter snow is bitterly cold. Allow this prince to take you somewhere warmer. He reached out toward me, intending to touch me. Suddenly, a branch of plum blossoms shot through the air. In an instant, it sliced off one of Prince Ethan Su's fingers. Only when he saw the severed finger fall to the ground did he finally react. Letting out a blood-curdling scream, Adrian Su stepped out from behind the bushes, a fur cloak draped over his shoulders, his bearing graceful and ethereal like an immortal. Yet a few snowflakes clung to his brows, giving him an air of cold distance. Prince Ethan Su stared at him in disbelief. Third brother. You actually dare to be this ruthless? Adrian Su smiled faintly. Yes, I dare. So what? What exactly do you intend to do about it? Prince Ethan Su shouted that he would report this to the emperor, but the pain was so unbearable that he rolled around on the ground, howling. In the end, he could only order the guard beside him to fetch help. Then he glared at Adrian Su and snarled, if you've got the guts, don't go anywhere. Adrian Su paid him no attention at all. Instead, he quickly walked toward me. Serena. Prince Ethan Su suddenly screamed again, his howl drowning out Adrian Su's words. Adrian Su frowned. He turned and walked over to him, then lowered his gaze to look at the man rolling on the ground in agony. What a useless piece of trash. Unable to endure even this little bit of pain, Adrian Su lifted his foot and stepped down directly on Ethan Su's wound. The pain was so intense that Ethan Su nearly fainted. He stared at Adrian Su, terror flooding his face as though he had seen a ghost. "You're not Adrian Su. You're not Adrian Su, are you?" Adrian Su would never be this cruel. Adrian Su narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he were pondering whether or not he should kill him to silence him. "What's going on here?" The Emperor's voice suddenly rang out. It turned out the Emperor had been strolling nearby with one of his favored consorts. Hearing the commotion, he had come over to see what was happening. The moment Ethan Su saw the Emperor, it was as though he had grasped a lifeline. Crawling and dragging himself along the ground, he scrambled to his side. "Father Emperor. He's not the Crown Prince, he's not Adrian Su. He wants to kill your son. What exactly happened?" The Emperor looked at the blood staining the ground, then at Ethan Su's severed finger, his expression turning grave. Ethan Su immediately exaggerated the story, recounting everything that had just occurred, embellishing it with extra details. He even swore that the person before them was not the Crown Prince, that the Crown Prince must have been possessed by a ghost. The Emperor slowly turned his head, his sharp gaze settling on Adrian Su. "Are the things Prince Ethan Su said true?" Almost instinctively, my fingers tightened around the edge of my sleeve. Adrian Su himself knew that at this point, the truth could no longer be concealed. "It is true that I severed his finger." "I wasn't asking about that." The air suddenly became suffocatingly still. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing, and the falling blossoms dared not drift down. Adrian Su gave a faint smile. "That is also true." After that, he briefly recounted everything to the Emperor, including the truth about his own identity. He appeared strangely calm, as if he had imagined this very scene countless times before. When Adrian Su finished speaking, Ethan Su stared at him in horror, forgetting even the wound on his hand. Everyone present was shaken by the revelation. "So, you are my fourth son." Adrian Su did not deny it. In the very next instant, the Emperor drew his sword and, swift as lightning, thrust it into the consort standing beside him. Everyone present was horrified. Even I could not hide my shock. Then the Emperor spoke calmly. "The third prince is gone. From now on, the fourth prince will take his place as Crown Prince. As for Prince Ethan Su, this matter must not be spread outside." The Emperor truly deserved his reputation. In the past, when only Adrian Su had stood out among the princes, everyone believed that in the Emperor's eyes, only Adrian Su was truly his son, while the others were merely subjects. Only now did we understand. In the Emperor's eyes, only the legitimate heir was his son, everyone else was merely a subject. Prince Ethan Su's eyes widened. "Father Emperor, are you just going to let this go? I've lost a finger. If you hadn't been fooling around like a beast, the fourth prince wouldn't even have bothered with you." The Emperor tossed the sword to the ground in front of him. "The guard you brought, deal with him yourself." Only then did the guard beside Ethan Su realize the danger he was in. He hurriedly fell to his knees, begging for mercy, but even if Ethan Su was unwilling, he dared not defy the Emperor's order. The Emperor then turned his gaze toward me. I immediately stepped forward, shielding Bao Zhu behind me. "She has been by my side since childhood," I said quickly. "I guarantee she will not reveal anything about this matter." Meanwhile, Adrian Su silently moved to stand in front of me as well. The Emperor's expression softened slightly. "Serena, don't be afraid. Your uncle trusts you." Fortunately, the Emperor had always been very fond of me. Prince Ethan Su gritted his teeth as he glared at Adrian Su, then cast an unwilling look in my direction. Just as he was about to leave, Adrian Su suddenly spoke. "Wait." I heard that Princess Consort Serena Su has good news. Congratulations, elder brother. Adrian Su fixed Ethan Su with a dark, chilling gaze. I imagine Prince Ethan Su must be feeling rather uneasy right now. A cold hand suddenly covered my eyes. Adrian Su's low voice sounded beside my ear. Then there's no need for this part of elder brother anymore. The next moment, Ethan Su screamed in agony again. I was not someone who feared the sight of blood, so I decisively pulled Adrian Su's hand away. What I saw was Ethan Su writhing on the ground, clutching his groin as he rolled back and forth. I froze. To dare do something like this right in front of the Emperor, no matter how favored he might be, escaping punishment would be nearly impossible. As that thought flashed through my mind, I suddenly understood Adrian Su's intention. He was testing where the Emperor's limit lay. He also wanted to probe the Emperor's attitude toward this son who had appeared out of nowhere. If the limit had not yet been crossed, nothing would happen. If it had been crossed, punishment would naturally follow. I suddenly remembered the words of the old imperial physician. Adrian Su had always been someone who cared only about the result, never the method. A madman. The Emperor was also momentarily stunned. He stared at the son standing before him in silence. Yet instead of growing angry, he suddenly burst into loud laughter. Good. Very good. Ruthless enough. Truly my son. You're just like me. In the end, Adrian Su was not punished. He had won this gamble. After the Emperor dragged Prince Ethan Su away, silence once again fell over the place. Adrian Su showed no sign of happiness. He looked at me and took something out from his sleeve. Serena, the Queen has arrived, Miss, Bao Zhu reminded softly. Just as I was about to step forward to greet her, Adrian Su suddenly pushed me into a nearby thicket. Seeing this, Bao Zhu hurriedly slipped in after me. Queen Isabella Su had come alone, the moment she saw Adrian Su. She raised her voice sharply. Adrian Su, why are you still here? Why aren't you helping me receive the ministers? Yet you've run all the way out here just to admire the flowers. You really do have far too much idle time. No wonder she had come by herself. After all, no one else could be allowed to know the Crown Prince's true identity. Adrian Su's face showed no expression. Your son will go over immediately. But the Queen was still dissatisfied. My cat has fallen ill, and I haven't seen you do anything about it. If Adrian Su were here, he would certainly have summoned an imperial physician to treat it and then comforted me. Without even waiting for Adrian Su to respond, she continued, of course. How could I forget? You've always been cruel and devoid of human feeling. At such a young age you were already capable of killing a leopard. How could someone like you possibly know how to care for animals? At that moment, the wind swept through the plum grove, snow filled the sky, everything around seemed to surge like rolling waves. Yet within Adrian Su's eyes there was not a single glimmer of light. His gaze was complicated, like humiliation, like resentment, and also like mockery. In the end, he merely frowned. His expression remained unchanged as he quietly wiped away the trace of blood at the corner of his mouth and replied calmly, Your son will have someone fetch an imperial physician. The Queen frowned. You truly aren't like him at all. If you keep behaving like this, sooner or later your father will discover the truth. Your father adored Adrian Su. If he finds out you're impersonating him, I won't escape the consequences either. He has already discovered it, Adrian Su answered indifferently. What? When did he discover it? The Queen immediately became tense. Just now. Before you arrived. Her eyes widened. And how did the Emperor react? He had no reaction. I severed Prince Ethan Su's finger. I even cut off that part of him. Yet Father Emperor didn't punish me. He lifted his head, his eyes filled with cold mockery. Only then did the queen notice that the ground was covered in blood. Even if the emperor didn't punish you, you injured Prince Ethan Su. The noble consort will certainly come looking for trouble with me. The more she spoke, the angrier she became. Suddenly, tears burst from her eyes. She raised her hand and slapped the son standing before her. Why wasn't it you who died back then? 5 clear finger marks instantly appeared on Adrian Su's pale face. Together with the blood at the corner of his mouth from his earlier coughing fit, he looked both disheveled and pitiful. His eyes were chaotic as he watched the queen's departing figure. I stood frozen in place, unsure whether I should step out. Adrian Su looked as though he needed to be alone for a while. But before I could think further, he had already withdrawn his emotions and stepped past the bushes to stand beside me. At last, no one remained to disturb him. From his sleeve, he took out a jade pendant. The pendant was milky white, shimmering with a faint violet sheen. It was the very jade pendant Adrian Su had commissioned all those years ago. Only then did I realize that his inner robe was completely soaked. From the corner of his garment, droplets of water occasionally fell to the ground. Snow clung to his hair and brows, so he had finally found that jade pendant. Without even changing his clothes, he had rushed straight here to give it to me, Serena. I found it. He tried to place the phoenix-shaped jade pendant into my hand, but for some reason, the jade in his palms suddenly shattered. He froze. Fragments slipped through his slender fingers and fell to the ground, producing sharp, brittle sounds. Adrian Su hurriedly crouched down in panic, frantically picking up the broken pieces and trying to fit them back together. But the more he tried to piece them together, the more they crumbled apart. He stared blankly at the fragments in his hands. After a long moment, he reached out and grasped the corner of my sleeve. Softly, he said, "Serena, I'm sorry." I pulled my sleeve back and reached out to help him up, stand up. But he was too heavy. I couldn't pull him to his feet. Suddenly, Adrian Su coughed violently and spat out a mouthful of blood. After a while, he finally steadied himself again, sitting on the ground in a daze, his clothes stained a vivid red. He looked at me. "Serena, wait for me a few more days. I'll carve another jade pendant for you. I can learn. I learn everything very quickly." Then suddenly, as if recalling something, he murmured quietly, "That's right. I learn everything very quickly. Only when it comes to learning how to love. And admitting that I love. I'm a little foolish. I was just one step too late. And now it can never be undone." This calm appearance of his was unlike the fragile, pitiful figure he had been before. Instead, it stirred an inexplicable unease in my heart. Suddenly, I remembered that day. He had been standing before the gates of the Jiang residence, tall and straight in a white robe, standing beneath the sunlight. The sunshine had been so bright and brilliant, yet it could not dispel the chill emanating from his body. And then I remembered the day at the Eastern Palace. His expression had been just as calm as it was now. White sheets of paper were scattered across the ground. On them was written the single character "you" again and again. Only one sheet bore the character "Wang," written in blood. It lay alone, far away from him, isolated from the rest of the world, like a lonely soul adrift amid desolate winds and sorrowful rain. Prince Ethan Su had rebelled. Driven into a corner, he had joined forces with Princeton and launched an attack on the imperial palace. It seemed that the one pulling the strings behind everything was Princeton. However, he appeared rather dissatisfied with the situation. perhaps because the timing had not yet fully matured. But Ethan Su had forced his hand, leaving him no choice but to act. Princeton did not bear the surname Su. His surname was Wang. He had once been a general and still held some military power in his hands. Ethan Su and Princeton united their troops and surrounded the imperial palace. In such a situation, how could the families of the great officials in court avoid being implicated? The Jiang residence was no exception. Just as my father was pacing anxiously, unable to sit still, Princess Consort Serena Su arrived at our gates. She said that she had purchased a house in the outskirts of the city and wished to invite me to stay there for a few days. I looked at her suspiciously. Princess Consort Serena Su pulled me aside to a quiet corner and whispered, "I owe the Crown Prince a favor. I promised him that I would protect you. The capital is in chaos right now. I'm taking you away for a few days so you can avoid the turmoil." I still did not quite understand what was happening. My family kept urging me to get married, she continued. At that time, the Crown Prince said he would introduce me to someone wealthy, powerful, with no children, and destined to die early. So I agreed. "What's your name?" I asked her. "Zhang Qiao Qiao." "Serena Su," I replied. Zhang Qiao Qiao did not only take me with her, she also brought my entire family along. When we reached the city gates, the soldiers guarding them attempted to stop us. Zhang Qiao Qiao raised her hand and patted her belly as though it were a watermelon. "The only son of Prince Ethan Su, the grandson of General Jiang. Do you dare to block our way? Try it and see what happens." At once, no one dared to stop her any longer. They could only follow closely behind, making sure we did not leave their sight. Several carriages were already waiting outside the city gates. After climbing into one of them, the first thing I noticed was a peace talisman lying quietly in the corner. It was the very talisman I had personally climbed thousands of steps to obtain. Upon it was the character I had embroidered myself. The character she meant the light of the morning sun. The sun, moon, and stars shine across all lands, yet the dense fog of the mortal world cannot reach them. While Prince Ethan Su was desperately attacking the imperial palace, his own princess consort was escorting the people of the Jiang residence out of the capital in order to repay the kindness of his rival. I did not know what Ethan Su would think if he learned of this. But Princeton clearly did not trust us. He had sent people to follow and watch over us. Yet none of this affected Zhang Qiao Qiao's mood in the slightest. At every meal, she still ate 3 full bowls of rice. Every day, she urged me to light the fire so we could grill meat and roast fish. Snow blanketed the estate, beautiful enough to stir the heart. The endless white seemed to wash away all the worries and power struggles of the capital, leaving behind a strange sense of peace and leisure. I stared absent-mindedly at the falling snow outside. Zhang Qiao Qiao patted my shoulder. "If that scoundrel Prince Ethan Su gets lucky and actually succeeds, then I'll become the empress someday. I'll protect you for the rest of your life. You don't need to worry." My gaze drifted to her slightly swollen belly. "If Prince Ethan Su fails, and you carry his bloodline inside you, aren't you afraid?" Zhang Qiao Qiao bit into a piece of chicken. "The Crown Prince promised me something. Even if Prince Ethan Su dies, the child in my belly won't be implicated. That was the condition for me protecting you. If weeds are not pulled out by the roots, the spring wind will bring them back again." But someone as proud as Adrian Su probably believed, even if they grew back, so what? Grass was still only grass. It could never stir up great waves. Zhang Qiao Qiao suddenly asked, "Serena, if you could choose, what kind of life would you want?" "What kind of life, for more than 10 years in this world?" I had never been given a choice. I had never even thought about such a question. The aroma of roasting meat rose warmly into the air. Out in the fields, the potato sprouts quietly pushed through the soil. Perhaps a peaceful rural life like this. To wander freely across magnificent mountains and rivers. To gaze upon the endless sea. To speak and act without constantly weighing gain and loss. To avoid spending an entire lifetime trapped within the walls of a residence. To know longer stare day after day at the same unchanging scenery. To never have to worry that the person who shared your pillow might change their heart, leaving you behind as the old love who weeps while the new one smiles. Jiang Qiao let out a long sigh. When I was younger, I thought the same way. I wanted to go to the frontier, to see the golden sands. I wanted to live a bold and glorious life, even if I never returned. Then she lowered her head and gently rubbed her belly. But now, that's no longer possible. Living like this is enough. In the end, the one who failed was still Prince Ethan Su. An arrow pierced straight through his heart. He died on the spot. Amid the chaos, everything was tangled like an unraveling thread. The emperor also passed away. Adrian Su dragged Princeton before me. "Serena," he said, "how do you think we should deal with him?" Looking at the man who had once murdered Adrian Su standing before me, I simply said coldly, "Tie stones to him. And throw him into the river." After returning to the capital, the old imperial physician had nothing to occupy his time, so he came to the Jiang residence every day. He said he missed the little turtle back in his hometown. Spring was approaching soon. It would be time to sow the fields. He wondered whether he could make it back in time to help his family. When a new emperor ascends the throne, a new court rises with him. After listening to the old imperial physician speak about the peaceful life in the countryside, my father also began to feel that the time had come for him to retire from office and return home to enjoy his old age. Adrian Su was overwhelmed with work and had no energy to concern himself with such matters. He had only just ascended the throne. Within the court alone, countless affairs demanded his attention. My father's memorial requesting retirement was sent back and forth several times before it finally caught Adrian Su's notice. "Prime Minister Jiang insists on leaving?" Adrian Su asked. "Yes," my father replied. "This old minister has reached the time when he should return to the countryside and farm the land." In truth, the main reason my father wished to resign was because he feared that the new emperor might make things difficult for him. After all, he had never expected the late emperor to pass away so suddenly, nor that the one who would ascend to the supreme throne would be the very man who had once nearly become the Jiang family's son-in-law. My father felt uneasy. Thus, he chose the safest path, to leave the capital, distance himself from power, and avoid future calamities. Even now, Adrian Su had not publicly revealed his true identity, and my father knew nothing of the truth. Adrian Su merely set the memorial in his hand aside and ordered someone to summon me to the palace. By the time I stepped into the hall, the sun was already setting. The crimson glow of the evening sun streamed through the window, illuminating the desk at the highest seat. Memorials were piled high upon it, the ink in the inkstone still wet, and the curtains swayed gently in the wind. The hall was empty. Just as I was about to leave, I suddenly felt someone approach from behind me. In the next moment, he wrapped his arms tightly around me. "Serena Su," he said softly, "I am now the son of heaven. All lands beneath the 4 seas belong to me. As long as I desire something, there is nothing I cannot do. Do you see this grand hall? I could lock you inside here. I could bind you with golden chains so that every day you would see only me. I would forbid anyone else from entering. When I eat, when I sleep, when I review the memorials, I would remain by your side. In the future, you will bear a prince for me. Just one will be enough. I will let him inherit the throne. You won't have to raise him. I will not allow anything to trouble you. You only need to care about me." He held me tightly, as though he wished to fuse me into his very bones. Yet with the slightest movement, I slipped free from his embrace. Adrian Sue immediately stepped back several paces with quiet restraint. Though his gaze never left me, his peach blossom eyes shimmered with unshed tears. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry, and I was so flustered that I did not know what to do. Clearly, he was the one who had spoken such outrageous words. Yet he was the one who began crying first. The sentence that had risen to my lips, the one forever separated between us by the name Adrian Sue, remained unspoken in the end. Adrian Sue's eyes were still filled with stubborn darkness and hopeless despair, like they were submerged beneath that cold river water. "But I can't do it," he said. "The question Jiang Qiao asked you about the kind of life you wanted. I was the one who asked her to ask you. Recently, I didn't dare come see you. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself and would end up locking you away. But even if I locked you up, you would no longer be yourself. You would hate me to the marrow of your bones. How could I give you another reason to hate me?" Adrian Sue let out a faint laugh, yet the smile on his face was bitter beyond words. "Serena Sue, I don't have much time left to live. You know that." My heart suddenly trembled. Before he died, Father Emperor wrote an edict naming Adrian Sue as the next emperor. You see, he always acted as though he favored no one. Yet in the end he still refused to acknowledge my identity before others. And I can only live the rest of my life under Adrian Sue's name. He said he did not want the Empress to be criticized by the world. Father Emperor said that when Mother was young, she had been a kind and gentle girl. But she had lived in the palace for too long. The schemes and struggles of the inner court had changed her. So he told me not to blame her. I don't care whether the world ever knows the name Adrian Sue. At that time, I only thought that if I forced you to stay with me no matter what, you would never be happy. And one day, you would become just like my mother. If you truly love someone, how could you bear to make them live unhappily?" From beginning to end, his gaze never left me. Suddenly, he gathered his courage and stepped forward, gripping my hand tightly. "Serena Sue, I truly love you. Every time I feel that I already love you to the point of death. The next day, my heart beats even more fiercely. This is your father's memorial of resignation. I have already approved it. You should go." He stuffed the memorial into my hands. Then he gently pushed me toward the door. Softly, he said, "Go forward. Don't look back. Go. Well, I haven't regretted it yet." The palace doors slowly closed. I stood there for a long time, gripping the memorial tightly in my hands. I could not even remember how I made my way back to the Jiang residence. My father took the memorial and looked at it. His expression held both joy and quiet emotion. After more than 10 years, it is finally time to return home in glory. The Jiang family and imperial physician Daniel Jiang were from the same hometown, and the relationship between our two families had always been close. My grandfather and imperial physician Daniel Jiang had been friends since childhood. One had passed the imperial examinations and entered official service, while the other had devoted himself to medicine. The two of them had once sworn that they would both achieve great accomplishments in their lives. And now, with their hair already white, it was finally time for them to return home together and enjoy their remaining years in peace. as we departed from the capital, many people came to see us off. Song Song stood there in a suit of armor, a crimson sword in her hand. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked. "After you leave, I'll follow my elder brother to the frontier. The new emperor is wise and enlightened. He's already granted me permission to enlist." I smiled. "Very beautiful. Today I'll reluctantly admit that you're the most beautiful woman in the capital. I won't argue with you about who's prettier anymore. Once I reach the frontier, I'll probably become ugly anyway." Song Song burst out laughing. Zhang Qiao waddled over with her large belly and stuffed a whole pile of food into my hands. "Take these with you. Eat them on the road. Don't let yourself go hungry." Prince Ethan Su was dead, yet the new emperor had not revoked his princely title. Instead, he ordered that it be passed on to the child in Princess Consort Serena Su's womb. Whether the child turned out to be a boy or a girl, the child would still be granted the title of prince, and so Zhang Qiao had suddenly risen in status, becoming a dowager princess in a single step. Perhaps because she had been eating and sleeping well recently, she looked even more plump and radiant than before. When Zhang Qiao saw Song Song standing there in armor, she couldn't hide her admiration. "After you reach the frontier, can you write to me? Tell me about the scenery there." Song Song nodded. "Of course. What's your name?" she asked. "Zhang Qiao. I'm Song Song." Imperial physician Daniel Jiang took several pills from a small box and handed them to me. "These are rare medicines that this old man gathered over many years of climbing mountains and crossing rivers. At critical moments, they can save lives. Take them with you. But don't waste them carelessly." The old physician was rather unlucky. In the end, he still could not leave the capital, because the new emperor still needed him. He watched us depart with deep regret. "Remember to tell my son not to forget to take care of the little turtle." After saying farewell to everyone, we finally set off. The carriage slowly began to move forward. I was the last person to climb aboard. Before stepping inside, I couldn't help but turn back for one final glance. High atop the city wall stood a solitary figure. It was too far away, too indistinct. I could not see clearly. Many years later, as time flowed on like water, when I thought back to that moment, I finally understood. That had been the last time I ever saw Adrian Su. Extra story: Adrian Su, the living can never compete with the dead. Yet he had thrown everything into the struggle. If he had not fought for it, he would have had nothing at all, in his entire life. What had he ever possessed that he had not seized with his own hands? From a young age, Adrian Su had already known his own identity. A son who could never step into the light of day beneath the Empress. The time he spent beside imperial physician Daniel Jiang was perhaps the only carefree period he had known in all the years of his life. The old physician was not particularly old, yet he had long grown weary of the constant struggles for power within the imperial court. He had always hoped to find an opportunity to retire early and return to his hometown to farm the land, to wander freely through the seasons, living leisurely without worrying about worldly affairs. Imperial physician Daniel Jiang called him Your Highness, yet he treated him with the affection one might show a grandson. He often took him along to go fishing. But not a single fish was ever caught. On their way home one day, the old physician refused to accept defeat. After searching everywhere, he finally caught a turtle for him. Beaming with delight, he said, "Your Highness, when this old minister takes you back to my hometown someday, you'll see how beautiful the scenery is there. We'll dig a pond together and raise it there." The land had been purchased, the garden had been built, the pond had been dug. Imperial physician Daniel Jiang had already received permission from the emperor to return home and enjoy his retirement. Yet on that very day, the queen used the excuse of returning to her family home to take Adrian Su away. At that time, he was still young and did not understand what was happening. Seeing the mother who had given birth to him for the very first time, he was filled with excitement, but he did not know how to express it. He could only silently gaze at her, carefully following behind her. Yet the queen disliked this child who clung to her constantly. She frowned impatiently. "Don't you have anything better to do? Why do you follow me around every day?" On the day before returning to the palace, the queen came up with an idea. She sent her young son to the family's secret training camp for shadow guards. Most of the children there were around Adrian Su's age. If he was sent there, no one would discover the truth. In the future, he could also protect Adrian Su in times of danger. The queen had grown up surrounded by luxury and comfort. She only knew that the people trained in the shadow guard camp were extremely capable. She had no idea what one would have to endure after stepping into that place. Poor Adrian Su had not even spent a few days beside his mother before he was sent into that cruel training camp. Within just a few short days, he had been tortured until he was nearly out of breath. His body was covered in wounds. The leader of the camp guessed his identity, so he gave Adrian Su a mask, to prevent others from realizing that he was the twin brother of the crown prince. At first, the queen felt a trace of guilt, so several months later, she found an opportunity to visit her son. By that time, Adrian Su had already developed an extraordinary ability to observe his surroundings. The moment the queen appeared, he recognized her immediately, his heart filled with excitement. When all the other children recoiled in fear at the leopard before them, only he rushed forward alone. He threw his arms around the beast, nearly knocked flat to the ground. Yet in that very moment he seized the chance to jab out the leopard's eyes, blinding it and subduing the savage creature. At times like this, the leader would usually praise him, so he shyly stole a glance toward the shadowed corner where Queen Isabella Su stood watching. But what met his gaze was not approval, only disgust. He froze, utterly at a loss. It was only much later that he finally understood. Those who are ruthless and vicious will never be loved by the people around them, not even by the one who gave birth to them. He regretted it deeply. The next time his mother came, he would pretend to be more obedient. But Queen Isabella Su never appeared again. He waited 1 day, 2 days. Then a year, 2 years. Until the day he was finally sent to stand beside Adrian Su. When he saw the gentle smile Queen Isabella Su gave Adrian Su, he suddenly realized that his mother could, in fact, be that tender. He thought he would feel unwilling. He thought he would feel jealousy. But he felt nothing. Not a ripple stirred in his heart. No love, no hatred, no joy, anger, sorrow, or delight. At some unknown moment, he had already lost the desire for love. The feelings inside him had long since gone numb. The person he had become now was someone utterly heartless. Step by step, he secretly built power for himself. He did not wish to remain forever a man hidden in the shadows, unknown to the world. Adrian Su had a childhood sweetheart, a young lady of extraordinary beauty, the perfect image of a noble maiden raised within the boudoir. One day, she burned an entire stack of books on female virtues and etiquette. With proud confidence and flawless reasoning, she declared to the nursemaid beside her, "I have my own eyes. When I see mountains, I know mountains. When I see rivers, I know rivers. When I see people, I know people. If I don't understand something, I can go see it myself, think for myself, and learn for myself. I don't need them pointing fingers and lecturing me." "Miss, you may say such things to this servant," the nursemaid hurriedly whispered, alarmed, but never in front of outsiders. The little girl pouted. He found her rather interesting. Adrian Su grew up alongside her. Everyone knew that. But in the places where they could not see, He too had grown up beside her. Adrian Su liked that young lady very much. But he did not like anyone. All he wanted was to climb higher. He had no need to like anyone. Yet the world is fickle, and fate delights in cruel tricks. Who could have imagined that someone like Adrian Su would one day fall into such circumstances? His death came too suddenly, leaving people sighing that heaven itself envied the talented. No matter how noble one's birth, no matter how outstanding one's character or appearance, a human life is equally fragile. He too had fallen into that river, but he was fortunate enough to survive. Clawing desperately to the shore, he collapsed from exhaustion and fainted. Jiang discovered him there. After removing the mask from his face and seeing his strikingly handsome features, she decided to bring him back home. He awoke in a strange place, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He did not know whether the assassins were still nearby, so he could only pretend to have lost his memory. Once he confirmed that the place was safe, he decided to remain for a while to recover from his injuries. Jiang was an ambitious woman, he could tell at a glance, so when he overheard her trying to stop her father from treating his wounds, he was not surprised in the slightest. What she thought did not matter. After all, once he left this place, he would kill them to silence them. He truly was a ruthless and vicious man. Every day he secretly searched the stretch of river where the two of them had fallen, hoping to find Adrian Su. But no matter how long he searched, he could not find him. Until the day he and his men arrived, falling to their knees before him and shouting, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." That was also the day he found Adrian Su's corpse. When he reached the spot, Adrian Su's hand was still tightly clutching a jade pendant. No one knew what Adrian Su had been thinking during those final hours of his life. After finishing the burial, he threw the jade pendant into the river and gave a cold laugh. "You're dead already. She is no longer yours." Since those people had mistaken him for Adrian Su, he merely went along with the current. On the road back, he had already prepared his strategy. He had to secure his position in the court as quickly as possible, because no secret could be hidden forever. And he had no intention of living under Adrian Su's name for the rest of his life. For that reason, it was best to distance himself from those who had once been close to Adrian Su. The Jiang family was one of them. Once he returned to the capital, he could use Jiang as an excuse to request the emperor to annul the engagement. He did not like anyone. All he wanted was to climb higher, never turning back. The emperor refused, so he knelt outside the palace hall for several days and nights. He did not care that his wounds had yet to heal. He did not care that rain poured down like torrents. After all, he had long grown accustomed to pain like this. That day, dark clouds filled the sky. She approached him, holding an umbrella. Before she even came close, he had already noticed her. She lifted the umbrella and sheltered him beneath it. No one had ever held an umbrella for him before. What had he been thinking at that moment? He hadn't been thinking of anything at all. His mind was completely blank. All he knew was that she was standing very close to him. It was also the first time he had ever seen her from such a short distance. He tried hard to restrain himself from turning his head to look at her. Instead, he quietly shifted his body out from beneath the umbrella, letting the rain lash mercilessly against him. When the engagement was successfully annulled, a strange discomfort settled in his heart, especially when he saw her standing on the windswept cliff, crying. She rarely cried. He remembered that very clearly. She had always been an extremely rational person. Moreover, Adrian Su had protected her so carefully that the number of times she had shed tears could be counted on one hand. Yet now, the moment he stood beside her, he had already made her cry like this. Even so, the plans he had laid out would not allow him to stop. If anyone were to discover the truth, he would certainly lose his life. Afterward, she exchanged everything in the Eastern Palace for copper coins and distributed them to the people along the streets, handing them out while drums and gongs sounded loudly. He was a little surprised. But then he thought again. Of course it should be like this. She was Jiang Huayue. When Jiang Huayue chose a musical instrument, she did not select the noble guqin but instead chose an ordinary harp. Since she was very young, Jiang Huayue had burned the books of female virtue and etiquette that others treated like treasured bedside guides. At her first birthday ceremony, she ignored the table filled with glittering jewels and instead chose the crown prince. She was a noble lady admired by all. Her every movement graceful and composed, yet at times she could also be rebellious, prone to stubborn anger. Both he and Adrian Su understood her very well. But Adrian Su liked her. He did not. Did he truly not like anyone? If he did not like her, why did he understand her so thoroughly? For a very long time, he did not dare to see her, until the year of the Plum Blossom Appreciation Banquet. After finishing a piece of music, he saw her slender hand tuck a plum blossom into her hair. Suddenly he remembered the way she had once stubbornly insisted on learning the harp simply because she found one particularly beautiful. He remembered the proud way she argued with her nursemaid. So many moments from the past, she was the only girl who had ever appeared in his youth. How could he possibly not have been moved? How could Rong Wang not love Jiang Huayue? His heart had clearly stirred. So why had he not dared to admit it? In the end, he still chose to turn away. Suddenly his head throbbed with pain, and his heart clenched as if stabbed. Old wounds and new wounds across his body seemed to flare up all at once. The pain blurred his vision. When he saw her resolute figure walking away without looking back, at that moment, he regretted it. By the time he realized that he had fallen in love, it was already too late. Everything he had done before now suddenly seemed meaningless. Now the only thing he wanted in this world was her. But to mend what had been broken, a price would always have to be paid. It didn't matter. If you loved someone, you had to fight for them. He wanted her love. Even if he had to live the rest of his life under Adrian Su's name, he would accept it. He found an opportunity to claim that his memories had returned. After that, he tried desperately to make amends to her. He approached her again and again. Even when she barely spared him a glance, he felt it did not matter. The wound on his head kept closing only to split open again. Each time it was about to heal, he would tear it open once more. Jiang Huayue. This girl was not as hard-hearted as she appeared. Sure enough, his tactic made her soften, even if only a little. That time, she advised him to give up. But they were not his Huayue, my Huayue. He murmured those 4 words silently to himself, again and again, telling himself that even if he had to live the rest of his life as Adrian Su, it would not matter. Then came the emperor's birthday banquet. Ethan Su, the toad lusting after swan meat, actually dared to request a marriage with Huayue. He boldly asked the emperor to grant the marriage. The emperor would surely refuse. He would never allow the Jiang family to become Ethan Su's allies. But seeing the emperor slightly drunk, Rong Wang did not dare to gamble on it, so he secretly struck himself with a palm strike, coughing up a mouthful of blood and successfully forcing the banquet to halt midway. The old imperial physician knew nothing of the matter. In the chaos, he was dragged by the people of the Eastern Palace to treat the patient. The moment he took Rong Wang's pulse, he immediately realized that he was not Adrian Su. Adrian Su's body could never have been this weak. The old man was furious. He loudly scolded him before storming away. Rong Wang knew that someone inside the hall was secretly listening. After the imperial physician left, he stepped past the screen, intending to silence the witness. But the person he saw was Jiang Huayue. There was no hiding it anymore. Sure enough, she had already guessed. In that instant, he felt fear, panic, and faintly, even a trace of joy. With solemn seriousness, he spoke each word clearly, telling her his name, Rong Wang. Jiang Huayue, remember this well. I am Rong Wang. He allowed the old imperial physician to tell her about his background. He wanted her to feel sympathy for him. He was gambling that she would. Queen Isabella Su feared implicating herself and would never reveal his identity. The imperial physician was a man of loyalty and righteousness. He would not speak either. But she was different. She had once been manipulated by him. If she chose to tell her family or report everything to the emperor, he did not know what fate would be waiting for him. If the emperor chose to investigate, with what little power he currently held, he would never be able to resist. He had wagered his very life, and in the end, she truly had softened. Yet she still refused to accept him. She had always lived with clear reason. If something was wrong, then it was wrong. She would never deceive herself simply because her heart had softened. It did not matter. There was still a long road ahead. Little by little, he would break down the defenses in her heart. He learned embroidery. He helped her deal with every troubling matter. He even drank a cup of poisoned wine for her sake. But she was not easily deceived. She saw through him. She knew he had deliberately drunk that cup. She was angry. Jiang Huayue had actually become angry with him. Rong Wang could not help but smile. He kept smiling. Then he remembered the words of the old imperial physician. The old man had said that he was like a lamp nearly out of oil. He would not live for many more years. He thought to himself. Perhaps that was for the best. He did not need her to return his feelings. When he died, he did not want her to feel heartbroken. He only hoped that she would not hate him, and he wanted her to remember him, longer than she remembered the name Adrian Su. She once said to him, "The living can never compete with the dead." At that moment, his heart seemed to grow cold. But he was not someone who could be defeated so easily. He still wanted to compete. Adrian Su had been born with everything. But he himself had started with nothing. If he had not fought desperately for everything he wanted, perhaps he would have died long ago beneath the claws of some wild beast. Later, Ethan Su and Princeton joined forces in rebellion. With his own hands he suppressed the uprising and became the new emperor. No, that was not quite right. It should be said that Adrian Su became the new emperor, and he merely hid beneath that identity. But whether the world called him Adrian Su or Rong Wang, he did not care. As long as the people he cared about knew who he truly was, that was enough. His mother wished to secure her position firmly, then let her sit there. After she died, he would simply refuse to honor her with the title of Empress Dowager, leaving her to become a laughingstock for the entire realm. As for his Huayue, she wished to leave the capital with her family. He could not bear to let her go. But if he forced her to stay, she would not be happy. The Jiang family no longer trusted him. They wished to distance themselves from the court. No matter how well he treated her, without her family by her side, she would never feel safe. Besides, he did not have many years left to live. How could he ruin her entire life? He wanted to leave with her, to spend the last years of his life by her side. But he could not. He was the new emperor. And a girl as wonderful as she was, so many people would wish to stand beside her. If he insisted on doing such a thing, it would ruin her reputation in the future. He was a man of ambition, and the greatest ambition of his life was her. He did not need her to love him, as long as she remembered him for the rest of her life. He wanted to see her one last time. That was also the first time he held her in his arms and walked forward. Keep walking. Don't look back. When he was young, he had once looked back. Behind him he saw the old imperial physician silently wiping away tears, a sight he remembered for the rest of his life. When he was grown, he turned back again and saw a young girl placing a flower in her hair, a memory he would carry in his heart for an entire lifetime. Walk forward. Don't look back. Side story 2. Crown Prince Adrian Su was a figure of great renown, an upright gentleman of flawless conduct. his elegance and grace were known throughout the capital. Even after his death, his reputation remained the same: rites and music, painting and calligraphy, archery and horsemanship, poetry and literature. There was nothing he did not excel at. Moreover, he was tolerant and benevolent, deeply loved by the court officials and cherished by his imperial father. He was the perfect heir to the throne. There was only one trait that did not quite suit the path of a ruler. He wished that in this lifetime he would love only one person, and spend his entire life beside only one person. There was no special reason for it. He simply feared that Huaiyue might one day become like his own mother, spending every day dealing with concubines and beauties, with no time left to pay attention to him. Since childhood, Jiang Huaiyue's eyes had only ever seen him. In the future, it must remain that way. The crown prince was kind and compassionate, that was true, but his kindness was always accompanied by sharpness. Otherwise, how could he have suppressed the princes of the imperial clan for so many years? Yet that sharpness would always dissolve without him even realizing it whenever he stood before Jiang Huaiyue. When Huaiyue was 7 years old, she once snuck away from her nursemaid to secretly eat malt candy that Bao Zhu had bought for her. By accident, she broke one of her tiny baby teeth. That day she ran into the palace in great haste, covering her mouth with one hand, her expression filled with anxiety. The moment she arrived, she threw herself into his arms. "Crown Prince brother, I'm about to turn into a toothless monster." Having grown up within the deep palace, the crown prince, even though he was only in his early teens, already possessed a calm and mature mind. Even if he had just personally executed a spy moments before, he would not so much as blink. When Adrian Su saw Huaiyue, the gentleness in his eyes appeared instantly. In a flash he hid the dagger behind his back, and with a clean hand, untainted by even a trace of blood, he reached out and rubbed her head. "What's wrong, Crown Prince brother?" Huaiyue pointed at the gap in her teeth and burst into tears. "My tooth doesn't want me anymore. Will I become like grandfather, drinking porridge every day without teeth?" The crown prince did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he patiently explained that the tooth had simply grown old and needed to retire. Soon another tooth would grow to replace it. Huaiyue reluctantly believed him. As she grew older, Jiang Huaiyue no longer had time to visit the Eastern Palace so often. The Jiang family was extremely strict in educating their daughter. From morning until night she had to study music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. The crown prince was also very busy. Both of them carried heavy responsibilities. Yet no matter how busy he was, the crown prince would always find time to visit her. One day he happened to encounter Jiang Huaiyue arguing with her nursemaid. After the nursemaid left, she noticed the crown prince and immediately began to pout in grievance. "Nursemaid said those things must not be said outside, but I insist on saying them." Then she recounted everything from beginning to end. A few days later, the crown prince brought her a new set of books on female virtue and etiquette. When Huaiyue opened them, she discovered that inside were actually strange and fantastical novels. The crown prince had stayed up for several nights in a row selecting books suitable for a young girl of her age to read. A little later, Jiang Huaiyue found a rabbit and brought it home to raise in the garden. She adored that rabbit. Every day she would not go to sleep until she had watched it eat its fill. But the rabbit became increasingly spoiled. Every time it saw Adrian Su and Huaiyue together, it would stomp its feet in dissatisfaction. After several such incidents, Adrian Su finally lost his patience. He looked at the rabbit and smiled, a smile that was not quite a smile. "This rabbit is quite clever." The next day, a dish of spicy rabbit meat appeared on Jiang Huaiyue's dining table. She ate it happily. Only after finishing did she realize that her rabbit was nowhere to be seen. She thought she had just eaten her beloved pet. Jiang Huayue, who was usually so calm and composed, burst into uncontrollable sobs. That night she stayed up all night altering the ginger flower embroidery on the cloak she had intended to give the crown prince for his birthday, turning it instead into crooked characters that spelled Jiang Chao Chao. On the third day, Adrian Su came to apologize to her. He coaxed and comforted her for the entire day, and even gave her another rabbit before she finally forgave him. This new rabbit was gentle and adorable. It would not grow jealous for no reason. On the fourth day, Jiang Huayue discovered the truth. The rabbit meat had actually been bought by the kitchen. Her rabbit had simply run off to hide and only came hopping out of a pile of straw that very day. However, because it had fallen out of favor, Adrian Su later had the rabbit taken away. After that, the two of them became engaged. Just as the ceremony to confer the title of crown princess was approaching, news arrived from the court that the Yun River had flooded. Adrian Su had to accompany the officials to inspect the disaster. Jiang Huayue went to see him off at the city gate. As he was about to board the carriage, the crown prince gently rubbed her head. Huayue, don't overwork yourself embroidering the wedding robe. It will harm your eyes. When I return, I'll help you embroider it. Brilliant sunlight fell across his shoulders, casting a halo of light upon his white robes. A peerless young gentleman, radiant like a god. Side Story 3, Emperor Zhao, Adrian Su, reigned for 5 years before passing away. He had no consorts and no children. In the end, the throne was passed to a distant nephew. The one who cared for Emperor Zhao in his final moments was an elderly imperial physician surnamed Lin. White hair sending off black hair, overcome with grief and already advanced in age, he passed away not long afterward. Until the very end, he never managed to return home to look after that little turtle. After a summer rain passed, the garden was lush with grass and flowers. A knock sounded at the door. Bao Zhu opened it. Who is it? Standing outside was a young man she had never seen before, with a somewhat simple and awkward appearance. Sister Bao Zhu, I'm Li Hu, the younger brother of Li He, the commander of the Jingyan Guards. I've come to see Miss Jiang. There's something I must deliver to her. He raised a token. When Bao Zhu saw it, she allowed him inside. The small courtyard was not very large. Passing through the corridor, one could reach the back garden. In the corner of the yard stood a flourishing ancient tree. Beneath it sat a woman dressed in white, her features delicate, her demeanor elegant and composed. Li Hu recognized her. She was the young lady of the Jiang family, Jiang Huayue. In recent years she had written books under the identity of a woman and become famous throughout the land. In the future, her name would surely be remembered for generations. Yet even now, she had never married. Jiang Huayue lifted her head, her voice gentle. You're Li He's younger brother? Li Hu scratched his head awkwardly. Do I not resemble him? My brother is busy with his duties and cannot leave the capital for now, so he sent me in his place to see you. You do resemble him. What have you brought for me? Li Hu had come to deliver the news of Rong Wang's death. Her hand trembled slightly. Li Hu took out a small box containing ashes. These are my master's ashes. He instructed that they must be delivered personally into your hands. After you left, my master sent people to search along the banks of the Yun River. They turned over every inch of land. And in the end, they found the body of His Highness Adrian Su. To the world, there was only Emperor Zhao, whose name was Adrian Su. No one knew that the master who worried day and night for the people was, until the very end of his life, known only by us, the few servants who stayed close to him. The body buried in the imperial mausoleum was also that of His Highness Adrian Su. Miss Jiang, Li Hu said, his voice trembling. "No one remembers my master's real name anymore. But you must remember it well." Li Hu kept speaking and speaking, until he finally broke down in tears. Imperial physician Lin had also passed away. Carrying the 2 boxes of ashes, Li Hu had crossed mountains and rivers. When he set out, it had been winter. By the time he arrived, it was already summer. The plum blossoms had withered, the snow had melted, and the grasses and flowers had begun to grow green again. He had come to deliver one person's ashes to the woman he loved, and to bring another person's ashes back to the homeland that belonged to him. Both places were the same place, the very place where, all those years ago, the old imperial physician had said to Rong Wang, "Your Highness, one day this old servant will bring you back to my hometown." The scenery there was truly beautiful, mountains and rivers in harmony. Blue skies and drifting white clouds, endless fields, and simple, honest people. Li Hu wanted to hand the box to Jiang Huayue, but she did not take it. She only stared quietly at the urn before her, countless complicated emotions surging in her eyes. At last she spoke, "Even in death, he still wanted to deceive me. He could have revealed his true identity openly and honorably. He had been the emperor of a nation. How could such a small matter have been beyond his power? Just like that cup of poisoned wine years ago. He had only wanted to make her soften. He did not care whether others in the world knew his name. He only wanted her to remember the name he had chosen for this life." Rong Wang, seeing her firm refusal, Li Hu placed the box on the table and hurried away. Once outside the gate, he quietly hid behind the wall and watched the courtyard. Both Li Hu and the Jingyun guards had been personally trained by their master. Before his death, their master had instructed him that from now on he must follow Miss Jiang's orders and protect her well. In truth, even the young emperor who had just ascended the throne had been personally chosen by their master. The boy carried a distant trace of the Jiang family's bloodline, enough to ensure that the Jiang family would remain safe. After Li Hu left, Jiang Huayue did not react at first. She only stared at the urn on the table. On its surface was carved a single crimson character, Wang. It looked as though it had been written in blood. Suddenly, anger surged within her. She wanted to smash the box to pieces. She reached out and began wildly smashing everything in the courtyard. Broken fragments scattered across the ground. Only the urn remained lying there quietly, unmoved. All her life, Jiang Huayue had been calm and rational, yet the name Rong Wang always shattered the defenses in her heart. She hated him. She hated him to death. Without caring about appearances anymore, she collapsed beside the urn and began to cry uncontrollably. In the garden, the green plum tree quietly blossomed and bore fruit. Another season of green plums was approaching. But green plums were bitter things, sour and harsh. This tree had been planted when she first moved here. At that time it had only been as tall as a person's head. Now its branches had spread wide, covering an entire corner of the garden in shade. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. This year she was already over 20 years old. In just a few months, she would reach the same age Rong Wang had been when he once stood before the gate of her home. A few years later, she would reach the age he had been when he pushed her out of the palace hall and told her not to look back. But that day, she still could not help turning around. Only now did she realize that had been the last time she would ever see him. The end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.